This video will show how I dissect the different layers off of the whole mouse eye. Items you'll need some PBS or some other isotonic fluid of your choice, some various forceps. I use straight spring scissors as well as a 10 millimeter culture disc, plastic disposable fine, and it's a transferable pipette. You need to cut the tip off so it's large enough to transfer the whole eye. I do this dissection with the eye in isotonic fluid. I've found that if you do it outside of the fluid, that once you get the cornea open and the vitreous leaves, that the eye will actually collapse on itself and it's harder to dissect. So it's kind of like bobbing for apples working around, and you'll see it moving around a lot. But ultimately it's easier, and the tissue comes out more intact and in one piece. Well, when I dissect out the whole eye, I like to leave some tissue attached. It gives me something to grasp onto because the eye is going to want to float away, being it's floating in fluid. I make my first cut by grasping the conjunctiva border at the corneoscleral junction with some curved forceps, and use that to hold it still, as well as it pulls up an edge so I can make my first incision. If you need all the tissues, try to make it above the transition zone into the cornea. If you only need the retina, you can actually make it below, and I will show you this later. I will show you how to do all the tissues, so this will be into the cornea. Orient the eye so that the cornea is facing up, and then you can actually see the tip of your scissors through the cornea. Try not to cut the iris if possible. It's easy to get the scissors up underneath it, especially if you want the iris to come out intact. Small punctures shouldn't affect it because you will cut her on the same lines in a minute to remove the iris. Since my field of view in the microscope is a little larger, I do need to keep orienting it back in the center so you can see what I'm doing. But try to be as careful as possible. Take your time, especially if you need an intact cornea, just to stay along the transition zone of the corneoscleral junction, and just feed the eye into the jaws of the scissors with your forceps hand. Now, depending on how close your cuts were to the cornea to the corneoscleral junction, you may have some of the ciliary body and iris stuck to it. So just as you slowly lift it off, and not just pull it off quickly. So then you have time to dissect off the iris if you need it intact. Removing the iris is more of a blunt dissection. It is real fragile, so try not to grasp it and just kind of use the tip of your forceps to just kind of separate it from the ciliary body. The ciliary body is adhered pretty well to the retina, so just kind of grasp at the edges and slowly separate it. The mouse iris is thin and friable, and if it stays outside of the fluid for very long, it will dry out. So try to transfer it in the isotonic fluid. Next, just probe out the lens. If it is difficult to get out, you may have to kind of milk it out by squeezing the entire eye. But in this case, the lens came out fairly easily. Back to the eye cup. If you have a whole lot of extra tissue, in some cases you'll have more than what I have here. Try to pull off anything major just to get it out of your way, because in the next step we will start peeling the sclera off the retina, and that's just more to peel through. In this eye, there's not a whole lot. The muscle attachments aren't too interfering, but I will take off some of it. Next, I'm going to try to find a good place to get up underneath the sclera and separate it from the retina. Here I just pull off an edge and I can see the transition between the tissues. I will get my scissors to make an initial cut, just to give me because the sclera will tear off fairly easily, but by making an incision you kind of control the direction you're tearing, and it can be more of a clean dissection. After there's an initial cut, you can use your forceps to kind of grasp at the leading edge and pull and separate the sclera off. It tears fairly easily, but you may want to make sure you do grasp near the leading edge, just to keep it more of a controlled tear. And you will reach tough spots where you just need to make sure it's controlled, since if you let it get away from you, it'll easily tear the retina underneath. Once you get it separated, you can use the tips of your forceps to kind of do a blunt dissection and kind of separate the retina off of the sclera. When you get to the optic nerve head, it will separate as well. It stays intact with the sclera. If you need it, you'll have to dissect it around the sclera, but it will pull right off of the retina without much trouble. And you can see here where if you had too much tissue still on this sclera, how it would hinder you and get in your way. If you happen to reach a spot where it's showing you more resistance, just start back at the ciliary body and the retina and just start a new incision and kind of work your way around, and eventually they'll meet. If you haven't noticed, I am trying not to touch the retina at all, other than just at the blunt dissection. All my grasping is on the sclera, because the retina is super fragile, and you just need to limit as much contact with it as possible. Now, what you have left is the intact retina. Hopefully it's all in one piece, no tears or pieces missing. But you still have the ciliary body attached. Its ciliary body actually doesn't have pigment to it. What you see with the pigment is some of the leftover iris. But the ciliary body will separate from the retina. You just kind of have to grasp an area and gently pull from the retina, and it will kind of peel off. It is difficult to do this all in one piece. As you're pulling off the ciliary body, use your extra forceps to kind of restrain the retina without grasping it, and you can see how I'm just gives me something to pry against, and just be as gentle and as possible. If you're just doing a whole mount and you do not need the ciliary body for separate studies, you can leave this intact. When you're staining the whole retina, the ciliary body, if it folds in on itself, it has a tendency to stick to itself on the other side and doesn't always let the stain in. So I always try to get it off, but it's not the end of the world if you don't get it all. I'll place my culture dish over the metric ruler again just to give you an idea of the scale we're working on. This came from an adult average sized mouse, and as you can see it's about 3 millimeters wide in diameter. This can be challenging. All I can say is if you're going to have to do these for anatomy sections, get your hands on some extra mice, some extra eyes that people aren't used, that have been perfused, and just practice. Take them out. Try to get as many different tissues off and that you can, that's usable, just before you need to do the one for your actual studies.